Hi, this is Deb Wenger. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 11, Advertising, the selling of a message. And so when we think about advertising, most often we think about television or we think about a newspaper ad. But the reality of it is that advertising is everywhere. It's ubiquitous, in other words. If you get into a cab in New York, there's going to be advertising on the little screen in the back seat of the cab. If you are a Twitter user, you may see a sponsored tweet. When you choose to wear an Under Armour shirt that has the logo prominently displayed, essentially you are involved in advertising and you're consuming advertising. So what is advertising? How do we define it? Well, according to your text, it's any form of non-personal communication about an organization, product, service, or idea by an identified sponsor. So if you think about it, the non-personal essentially means that it's not when your friend tells you that Nikes are better than Under Armour. It's when you watch a paid-for message that tells you Nike is better than Under Armour. And this element of it being from an identified sponsor is important because a lot of times it can be challenging to figure out really what is the difference between public relations, marketing, advertising, because that line seems to blur. So this guy, Robert Wynn, who's a PR practitioner, says that advertising is paid media, public relations is earned media. So what do we mean by that? So if you read a story about the Apple iWatch, presumably if it's in the Wall Street Journal, that's earned media. So somebody at the Wall Street Journal said, this is an important story to cover. Let's tell people about the Apple Watch. I'm sorry, I think I called it the iWatch. It's just called the Apple Watch. If you are watching American Idol and you see an advertisement touting how wonderful the Apple Watch is, that is the difference between paid media and earned media. So somebody did a good enough job of selling the Wall Street Journal on the idea that the Apple Watch made a good story. That's PR. Somebody went and bought time during American Idol from Fox. That's advertising. All right, so advertising and media have been intertwined for nearly 2 centuries now. If you remember back when we were talking about newspapers, it was in the 1830s that the penny press came into being, and essentially what made newspapers so cheap was the fact that they were accepting advertising. And so the advertising essentially helped pay for the cost of printing that newspaper, which meant the public got to pay less. In the mid-1800s, we saw the rise of consumer magazines, and to some extent, especially some of the women-oriented magazines, were primarily vehicles for advertisements. They were ways for advertisers to reach a demographic that was very desirable because women control so much of household spending. When radio and television were first conceived, they were essentially conceived as being advertising vehicles. And so they were always going to be free media because they knew that they wanted advertising to pay for the programming that were there. Now, of course, we have things like sponsored tweets and mobile ads, and who knows what's coming in the future. We've already been talking about internet-enabled refrigerators that will note when your milk is at a low level and shoot you the latest ads from local grocery stores about, the cheapest milk in town. So advertising is already ubiquitous and likely to get even more so. Ultimately, the relationship between advertising and media is that the media sells the audience that they gather to advertisers. So why is it important for WTVA and Tupelo to have a lot of viewers? They don't really have much competition. Why do they work every day to bring more viewers into the tent? Because the more viewers they have, the more they can charge advertisers. The more advertisers are interested in running their ads on that station. So there are different types of advertising. Consumer advertising is the one that we're probably most familiar with. You see here, if you happen to read the DM online, you might have seen this Oxford Urgent Care ad before. So this is an example of local advertising. So it's designed to get people here in Oxford to use this local service. National ads are less likely about, go to store X to buy product A, and more about trying to build demand for a product that's available around the country. So, an ad for a Toyota 4Runner is going to air nationally because you can purchase that vehicle nationally. Consumer advertising, of course, has a couple of different agendas. One is a direct action message, and so the idea is to get you to go buy something or get you to sign up for something. Then there's also an indirect action message, and oftentimes these are designed to create an image for a company or a brand and make you feel good about that product. So you're not really saying go buy Apple Watch, but you're saying, aren't Apple Watches cool? So here's an example of one of the top television commercials of 2014 according to Advertising Age. And what's particularly interesting to me about this ad is it's for a product most of us know something about, which is Coca-Cola, but it was designed for the Argentinian market. However, we can watch this ad and there's absolutely no need to know Spanish because it's an image campaign and it's trying to project a certain image of what Coca-Cola is in these people's lives. So let's watch this.
There's a light, a certain kind of light that never shone on me. I want my life to be what God does it to find God. Ain't God. Hey, hey. You don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like to love somebody the way I love you.
Okay, sorry about that stuttering there with the video. You can certainly Google Coca-Cola Life Argentina and watch that without the little pauses in that video. But why does that video work? Because it deals with the universal theme. It draws us in with music. It makes somebody who is watching television potentially pause and get involved in this little story. Storytelling is such an important part of advertising. And then makes you potentially feel good about Coca-Cola, that Coca-Cola is a part of our lives. So this is definitely an image campaign. There's no push to get you to go out and buy Coke. It just says that Coke is part of our lives. All right, other forms of advertising. So advocacy advertising, so this is an ad that's designed to promote a particular point of view. So oftentimes political advertising falls into this realm, getting you to support a new referendum or initiative. This could, though, be something that a trade organization, Got Milk, in a way, is an example of advocacy advertising, trying to promote the fact that milk is good for you. Public service advertising. So the Sarah McLachlan ads are, often referenced when we talk about effective public service advertising. I want to cry every time I see those poor puppies trapped behind those cages. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. Your text talks about some of the most effective public service campaigns ever, the Smokey the Bear campaign, the Don't Litter campaign. All of these are designed to essentially make the society aware of a problem or to try to address an issue or concern. And then there's trade advertising, basically sometimes called business to business, where one company that makes a part for an airplane, let's say, is promoting the wonders of that airplane part to a company that needs it. So in the ad business, there are some key players, and I'm sure that if you think about it, you could probably name them off the top of your head. But certainly, first we need a client, so you need somebody with something to sell. Whether that's McDonald's or Apple or, Red Med here in Oxford. There was an era, a fairly extensive era, in which you needed an ad agency. So a group of advertising professionals who would come up with an advertising campaign to essentially help Company A sell their product. I don't know how many Mad Men fans we have out there. But certainly that kind of culture of there being standalone advertising agencies seems to be diminishing, and we'll talk about that in a separate interview with the head of our IMC program here at Ole Miss, because there's less just a advertising agency that does nothing but advertising, and more of an integrated marketing communication approach. Certainly the media, we've already said, play a big part of this, but ads appear in many different types of media. We've already talked about billboards and tweets and screens in the back of your cab or on the airplane, when you're fastening your seatbelt. So advertising messages essentially bombard us through media. And then finally is the audience. You would clearly say last but not least, because the audience has never been more important to the whole ad business model and strategy. All right, so branding the client. Your book talks about the definition of a brand name. So a word or phrase attached to a company, service, or product so they can be better promoted and identified. And brands, we live with brands. I have a 12-year-old who, is absolutely sure that Jordans are going to help him play basketball better than Under Armour. Early brands that your book talks about were Quaker Oats, Pears Soap. We could all rattle off, 50, 60 brands very easily because branding and advertising have been tied again for decades and decades. So brands themselves are created in part by advertising, but essentially the definition of a particular brand depends on the interactions for that company or that brand with consumers. But many companies say that every interaction you have with a brand, whether it's the ad you watch, the product you buy, what you hear about them on social media, those little touch points all have an influence on brand. So most of what we've just talked about, of course, were from the company side. The agency side, there are a number of things that advertising agencies, IMC entities do to help create advertising. In the beginning is research and planning. So you have to ask, how do I meet the client's objectives? And how ultimately do we measure whether or not the ads did what they wanted? There's the creative activity, which I think a lot of people tend to focus on as consumers, is how interesting, how funny, how clever was that ad. So at times, the creative people are all about, I want to make this ad rock, and the sales people are saying, well, it's lovely, but it doesn't sell cars. So there is that tension between the two. And then there's actually an entire profession built around media planning. So deciding, is it better to purchase sponsored tweets or run a television ad? What's the most cost-effective way that we can reach this target audience? So the audience has never had more power in this whole equation than they do now. Although audiences have always been targeted, there's more information now about audiences. Every time we operate in a digital space at all, information about us is being tracked. So advertisers are now better able to target information to people that they think are more likely to be interested in it. In addition, targeting has been for many years and continues to be done with demographics, age, sex, race, ethnicity, etc. Geographics, of course, it makes no sense to target somebody in Memphis with an ad about urgent care in Oxford, right? And then psychographics, things about who we are as individuals and how we live our lives. Psychographics and VALS is something that the text spent a bit of time on. So this is what motivates you. Are you somebody who has to have the latest brand name? So psychographics look at people's lifestyles, their relationship to the products that they use or don't use, and certain personality traits. That section is interesting to read. I would make sure that you spend a little time on that with the text. It was developed by a company called SRI International and actually categorizes people based on what it is that motivates them as consumers. So if I'm a planner, how does that affect the type of car that I buy versus I'm an adventurer? So the future of advertising, we've been talking a lot in this class over this semester about the impact of digital media, which is affecting everything that has anything to do about communication. So Daniel Parmar is an employee of Merkle Marketing Agency, a significant marketing firm in California. And his quote is that by 2020, we have the ability to track and understand every interaction and have one-on-one conversations with every customer. So this is a prediction that the two-way nature of digital technology means that companies need to be thinking about, if we have the ability and potentially the expectation that we will interact with every single one of our customers, even if we have billions, how do we need to manage our advertising and our companies differently? He goes on to say that really the future of advertising will require people who are involved in it to remember three things. First is relevance. So understand what the customer needs, be there for them at the right time with a relevant answer regardless of medium. So if I'm searching for a dress to wear on Easter Sunday at church and I'm on my smartphone, then a company that sells the kind of dresses that I might want to wear needs to know that and be able to get that information to me when I'm on my smartphone. Restraint at the same time. So technology is offering new opportunities. We need to use it when appropriate. Do I want a drone flying through my neighborhood advertising the fact that Kroger has a special on ground beef? No. Do I want my refrigerator to be blasting in messages, or do I want there to be an ad on the seat in front of me when I'm at an Ole Miss football game? So again, this idea that we already have the technology that makes advertising exist nearly everywhere, but we also have the potential to ramp it up to unprecedented levels. And that gets us to responsibility. So as there are more and more capabilities to track what we're doing even in our own homes, how many times you go to the refrigerator could be an indication of a weight problem. Outdoor facial recognition, some of you might be aware that there's been a lot of controversy over all the cameras that are everywhere capturing us and being able to be used to track our movements when we're out in a public space. And then cross-device tracking capabilities means that it's never been more important for advertisers to be responsible and to think about the potential for overwhelming small children with advertising, to be promoting unhealthy lifestyles. And ultimately, part of what advertising of the future is going to do is become more service-oriented, to be there to provide information when we want it, and less about randomly trying to provide us information just because it's possible. So be sure to keep tweeting using the hashtag UMJOUR101. I like it best when the tweets are relevant to what we're discussing in class. And don't forget to watch the supplemental video that is to go along with Chapter 11 on Blackboard.